Alright everybody, so this is part 3 of my overview to Project 4. In the last video I was testing out my code, my CSS code, to make sure I had my basic header and my navigation and my content and my footer all laid out in the right place and everything was working properly. Now, one thing that I was doing, and one of the things that happens a lot, is I'll misname something. So I was trying to name a region. I had one div called container, and then I went and I named the large section here container, but what I meant to do is name it content and not container, because obviously if I named it container, there'd be two things named the same with the same name, and that doesn't work. So I changed it to content, and in my CSS I have it here, and since it's a div element that I've created, it's not an HTML5 semantic element like nav or header or footer, I have to put a hashtag in front of it. And then I'm changing the background color so it's not the same as these. Notice that my background for the container is 999, so I'm going to change this to 777. Basically it's a hexadecimal 777777, but since they're all the same numbers, I can just use one of them. So if I hit save and I refresh, you can see that here on my page I have my header, I have my navigation, and I have my content, and then I have my footer down here. So you can clearly see that all of these sections are laid out just like you would be doing here. You have your header, your nav, your content, and your footer, and then your actual container is in the background. This gray is in the background. In my case, the white is the actual background. So if I wanted to change the body, say to all black, if I refresh this, there's the body turns black, and so that back element is the body. Now, one thing we can do to become very specific about selecting particular elements on a page is we can use IDs, and we can use different IDs and different selectors. So for instance, if I wanted to mark a specific element, such as a certain element within my code. So for instance, in the project, you're going to be creating, designating the navigation as active or current or something like that. So whenever I'm on a web page, I want to be able to assign or change some elements specifically, and I can do that by assigning them CSS attributes and then establishing that through an ID. So for instance, if I wanted to change in my navigation this first list element, if I wanted that to be the active page or the current page or the first link or whatever, I can set that apart. I can do so by assigning it an ID. So I can say list, and then the next attribute is ID equals, and then in quotes I'm going to say first, just to say this is the first element in my list. I'm going to hit Control Save, and if I was to look at this right now, it wouldn't change anything because I haven't made a CSS for it. I've made the element attribute first, but when I go to CSS, I'm going to have to now make that. So I do that by designating it with a # or hashtag first. Now I don't have to have the hashtag in this. I do have to make sure I use the right word. And then I'm going to put the attribute here, and I'm just going to show it through the attribute color, and then I can choose a color, and I can by name. I'm just showing you the color attribute, and if I do it properly, over here you can see that it is now red. This has changed to red. The other elements themselves remain the same. And it's because I've designated that specific thing with that designation first. Okay? And so with that idea, I can use IDs to define specific attributes to things on my page. If I wanted to add more, to this, say I wanted to change another attribute, I could add font weight and make it bold or heavy or something like that, but we can get into that later on. But those are the basic ideas. So what's really, really, really important right now is that you understand that every page that you create from this point on is going to have HTML5 doc type. It's going to have the English language here in the HTML section, the designation of the document tree. We're going to have our meta character set, UTF-8. You're going to have the Google Shiv here that you add to basically educate old browsers about what you're going to be using. You're using the new HTML5 element or semantics. And then you're going to be using an embedded style sheet that is connecting your HTML page to your CSS. And then the CSS is going to be following the format of any element or any selector that is pretty much the standard term, like body and now header and content and footer. Those all are going to be selected without the designation of a hashtag. The hashtag is used for things like IDs, and you use those IDs when you create your own basic elements. So in this particular case, I created the container element, and I'm using a div here, a div ID of container. I use the div ID of content, and I'm using the div ID of first, and I'm designating those things as attributes basically of specific elements. So a division is a setup breaking up the HTML page into chunks, and you can call them either a division or a div, div, or you can now use the HTML5 semantic element. And again, if you go to WS Schools and you type in HTML5 semantics, and you can look up the HTML semantic elements, and you can see the different ones that are available. Right now we're using basically header to replace the old div ID header and replace the old nav ID header, or the nav ID and the footer ID. Now we're going to use our own. So you'll pretty much be using header, nav, either a section, pretty much a section or an article, or a footer for anything. So if you see any of these older methods, if you find something in the notes that's an old method, you can update it with the new HTML5 semantics. And that's really important so that everything is pretty much modernized now. Okay. So that pretty much covers the basic overview of Project 4. I just wanted to make sure you had that, and the notes and everything are out there on that content. You will be downloading a zip file that basically contains the source documents that I was just using. So you'll be putting a folder on your desktop that has source contents in it, and you'll be making your own style sheet, but you'll kind of begin with the basic elements and you'll be updating all that to have the right markup, the HTML semantic elements and all that sort of thing. All right, enjoy it, have fun, and I hope you it's interesting to see how the web pages start to develop with this new technique and these ideas.